In any working relationship, there can be misunderstandings, miscommunications, and difficulties. Unchecked, these can lead to conflict and dispute. As an employer, it's vital to establish good practices to avoid these problems and to resolve them as smoothly as possible when they can't be avoided. Start out as you mean to go on.
A clear induction, which not only covers the legal requirements of here's your written terms and conditions of employment, drawing your attention to anything that's a bit unusual, and here's what I need you to do day by day. Here are your instructions day by day. If you go beyond that and do a dry run, that can be really handy.
Over the course of a 2-week period, we do lots of short, repetitive parts of the core part of my care. And once they've mastered that, we then move on to longer parts of the shift. And then we might switch to the night work. And then we might merge the night work and the getting up work with or without support from an experienced person, to the point that when they're able to do it on their own, we can then roll out a more robust shift pattern.
You know, the PA has to learn about you and what you need, but you also need to learn about the PA as well. So I think, you know, it just takes time. It won't be perfect straight away, but, you know, after a couple of weeks of doing it, it'll be fine.
There are different ways to help to develop your PA's understanding of your needs.
I get stretches that I do. So we videoed it. So I give them videos of the stretches. And I say, I know you even watch it in my time. Let's say I'm in the toilet or I'm on the phone. Just watch these videos and learn how to do the stretches.
You've got to build them up. You've got to help them. You've got to explain to them that it's a journey, that it's a marathon, not a sprint.
I can monitor how things go and how long I feel that they need to shadow and observe other PAs before they have a shift where it's just them. So it's very much see how the land lies at the time and make decisions on that basis.
You might be required by your funders to provide certain formal training, but even if not, consider what training will help your PAs to succeed in their role. You could do this for everyone at the beginning of their employment with you, and you might also suggest particular training to address development needs of individuals when you see them struggling with particular skills.
There are many voluntary qualifications, so non-compulsory qualifications, that PAs can now enroll for, and they're not all expensive. Some of them are entirely free. The CQC has a list of them on its website, but there's also lots of other providers. It would make sense for you as an employer to at least consider supporting your employees for training that develops them as a person and upskills them, not just in your current needs in the employment relationship, but also in your future and their future, because this can be a really cost-effective way of keeping good employees, keeping people you trust working for you. But also, the law is increasingly standardizing expectations of staff development across all employment relationships. And it's one of the things to keep ahead of, is that if an employment relationship does break down and the employee's never been offered any opportunities to train in the things that they're doing badly or not doing at all in that employment relationship, then they can make an accusation that the problem was training, not them.
Remember that if you use some of your budget to pay for their training, then that's a valuable investment in their career progression, and you should make sure it's something that will also benefit you.
If an employee wants to leave you and is asking for training, put a clawback provision into their employment contract. Simply put in a term, and again, there are standard forms of this available, or insurance helplines can help you with it. put a standard term into the contract saying that if you have paid for them to do some training in, say, 1 year before they voluntarily leave your employment, they have to refund the money.
In case you have a member of your team who's not performing as they should, and training hasn't resolved the problem, you need to have a disciplinary procedure in place so that everyone knows the steps that will be taken and what the consequences will be at each stage.
It is an unconventional workplace. It is very often what appears to be a more relaxed setting than your average city office. And expectations can get blurred. And once the power shifts in a relationship and people stop forgetting that it is the employer who sets the rules, then all sorts of chaos can happen, and it's best to avoid that.
I was aware that they, had a lot of protocol and I guess processes that they would follow if there was a problem, and that was something. I guess that was something that was built into their life and their role as employers, and not as service users.
You can download a template grievance procedure from ACAS.
You need to do first informal warnings, setting out clearly what must change, when it must change, and how you will check that it has changed. Then formal warning if they haven't lived up to that. And after that, you're considering dismissal if they still don't improve their behaviour in an appreciable way. But all of that needs lots of documentation, and it's easier for everybody to head that off in advance than it is to deal with it with a formal dismissal later.
All of the processes are there, but what I do find is that actually just having a very kind of constructive, pragmatic, open dialogue when things are not working, I feel ends up being more realistic as something that enables the entire system to work.
As an employer, just having clear expectations for people's behaviour and what you need from them to start off with, and then if an issue does arise, communicating clearly why it's a problem in case somebody hasn't understood, and then if it continues to be a problem, I think to me it's just clearly saying that that's not acceptable, and once you've told somebody that, then they should be expecting further consequences, and also maybe at that point, if you really can't understand why something's so important, then maybe it's not the right job for you.
If they still break your rules, you need to think about performance management and go down the formal disciplinary route, but with signposting for them of where support is available for whatever unfortunate thing is going on in their lives.
If there was something serious that needed to change in what I was doing, it's for reasons of safety and reasons, the stakes are quite high. If somebody tells you that something needs to be done a certain way, you need to do it that way. And I think you need to have an expectation then that if you haven't heeded that, that the consequences might be quite, not severe is not the right word, but there needs to be things need to be done a certain way to keep everybody safe, and you've got a lot of responsibility in your role, and so if things aren't done that way, somebody is going to say, you're not just going to do it and think, oh dear, like silly, like oops, like that's not going to happen.
Strong and honest communication is also helpful if the working relationship is not so good. And by talking openly about a situation, you may be able to agree an amicable solution by agreement, instead of having to follow a disciplinary or dismissal procedure.
But there have been a couple of occasions with PAs that things were just not working out, and it's a sort of a by mutual consent we part company. And so I haven't had to go down the formal disciplinary route, but I could see if things were not, I could see things are unlikely to work out on both sides. And if things had continued, I could see myself going down that route.
What you need to do is identify what is the true reason why an employment relationship cannot continue. Is it the person? In which case, you need to look at the law of dismissal, and you need to make it a fair dismissal, unless they've only worked for you for a very short period of time.
As well as a disciplinary procedure, for times when you're not happy with your PA, you also need a grievance policy so that they have a safe and fair way to ask you to change your behaviour towards them. A template for that is also available from ACAS.
It's not just about attitude, it's about being told that, you know, if something isn't working for you, you need, you know, we can have a conversation about it, but also that, you know, your employer's not a mind reader. The way you deal with that is you have clear expectations from the start, and then hopefully you avoid any issues. And then if you've got clear expectations, then I think if things do go wrong, or somebody doesn't do what they're supposed to do, then there's also an expectation that that's going to be followed up. And I think in my contract, we had I guess a disciplinary procedure, or what would happen in those scenarios.
Sometimes, you know, PAs, relationships with PAs and I, yeah, things have got tougher, or like, you know, there's been disagreements, and it's always harder to deal with disagreements in situations where like there's literally no way out, right? Like if you are unhappy with somebody and they are also just about to kind of take you to the loo, like it's a very awkward feeling, right? And hence I'm generally nervous about using any kind of like HR playbook for the office with sort of the role of a PA employer, because it's fundamentally, the dynamic is so different.
You learn each time, don't you? And you sort of have to be prepared to that you will get it wrong sometimes.
It's so much easier to see why things go wrong after they've gone wrong. Whereas what we ought to be doing is preventing them by keeping a strong benchmark of minimum standards and keeping those as consistent as possible.
It's much easier to build someone up by praise than to force them to improve by criticism or sanctions.
As they're learning, to say to them, do you know, you did brilliant, you've picked that up really well, that's great, you know, and it can get a bit frustrating.
My first experience of managing people or working with PAs or support workers other than my family were it was a really difficult thing to get my head around. I learned an awful lot about myself and how to deal with things. Things didn't always go well when I was at university. And there was a particularly bad period that I didn't feel equipped to deal with. I did have support from the support service. I didn't want to bother my family with it, so I just sort of dealt with it in my way. But I felt I didn't have any control in that situation, and I vowed that I would never be in that position again. And so I made sure that I tried to put myself in the PA's shoes from time to time and see things from their perspective as well as from mine, and also to set the foundations from the beginning. And make things clear, have things organised, accepting my responsibilities, that this is a job, that, it's a place of employment, but also, just explaining things and being clear.
If you are going to discipline somebody over something, it's worth exploring whether they understand why it's important first, and maybe there's some merit in giving people that information in case they haven't figured it out for themselves.
One of the things that I find in general in my work and in my PA employment is that actually if people aren't doing the job well or can't do the job or don't really like the job, generally speaking, they know themselves.
I think always using the same language when you're giving instructions, and having an understanding between you and your PAs that there is a way that you'll ask for certain things, and that there'll be a consistency there, and that if they learn those and they do those precise those actions that correspond to those words however you might wish to do it, and that there will be consistency in that, is a massive relief for new PAs.
Generally speaking, I find that actually if you keep that channel of communication open, you will know when things are going wrong.
In terms of balancing, like, you always just remember that you are an employer first and foremost, but equally, like, this is not a traditional role in the sense of what people may commonly kind of sort of think of work. And so it is really important that you can't exclude the personal aspect for it. And I think when you are dealing with like problems or trying to kind of resolve any sort of disagreements, you cannot extract the very human side about it. And it just requires a lot more empathy and maybe trying to understand different points of view.
So one of the things that I don't believe in any of my jobs is that people can leave their personal lives outside the work environment and come in to work, because we are whole people, and if something's going on in our personal lives, it impacts the whole of us.
I was aware that we could have had like an open conversation about what made me comfortable, as well as obviously being aware of what was comfortable for that person and their home.
I think the problem is, see, if you go into a work environment, you're with people, and it's sort of any kind of agitations or certain things, or you don't really get on with somebody, it can all be, there's other people to go to, whereas when you're in with somebody and it's just you and them, it's very much more highlighted.
I guess I would also say that you maybe need to reflect on whether that problem is really with them or whether it's with you, and whether it's in your. But then even if it is, even if you think that is something that maybe you need to work on, I think there's a lot of merit in having that conversation. Say, I'm finding this thing really difficult.
Different people learn, listen, and take in information in different ways. You can help each PA to succeed by understanding how they can best absorb the things you want them to know. It might be that if you've recruited them for their practical strengths, they don't easily learn by reading or watching videos without being hands-on.
What I've noticed with PAs, any that walk in the door, if I start a new job, I've got a pad and a pen. None of them do that. They just start to go, and then the next day they don't have a clue what they're doing. But I also want shadowed. So I like somebody to come in and shadow. I don't like somebody coming in, fresh out the box. I like them to, shadow. Sometimes, though, it does feel as if they don't take anything because they don't write anything down.
I do have a care document, a care plan, which there's a PHB people make you have, which is to be fair, it is good to have it written down. What I'd be really honest about and say is, I'm not sure many carers fully read it and take it on board. I do think there's an element of the nature of the beast is that carers are really good carers because they want to care. They don't necessarily want to read a document and a manual, because if they wanted to read documents and manuals, they might be working in a job where that's what they do more often. And that's not a criticism of carers. It's just that their skill set, the way they like to learn, is quite often hands-on, get involved.
Stick to the same routine for the first few weeks. Don't let them go off piste. Just stick to the same routine and keep bringing them back in until, and then over time they can learn what you like, what you don't like, how you like something done.
You can head off problems or catch them early by setting yourself a formal structure to monitor how someone's learning and developing, whether their performance meets your standards, and whether they're satisfied in their role.
It's worth having, as you would with pretty much any employment relationship, a chat every year or every 6 months about personal development, career development, support for the employee. So an appraisal process where you have an honest conversation about how things are going, anything they can improve on their side, and they can also ask for support with new technology or a particular qualification that they'd like to do. Maybe there's a level 3 qualification or level 4 qualification that they'd like because of their future career. And you may not have to pay for it. You may not have the funds to pay for it. That's fine, but there may be funding available for them to do it anyway. There probably is in this sector for them to take a level 3 or 4 qualification, and showing support for them in doing that can strengthen the trust in the relationship and strengthen the stickability of the relationship, the bond that goes there. Plus, it's probably, in a more mercenary kind of way, it's probably really useful to have employees who are keen to upskill themselves as resources become available, as laws change, as requirements change, and as people's health changes.
Because I've worked my whole life and I've had managers, I know how I like to be managed. And my manager's great. We got on absolutely brilliantly, but we've also had to have, the awkward conversations.
I started doing regular check-in chats just to make sure everybody was okay and giving them the space to talk, because things can be quite busy otherwise, and then there isn't a good time to deal with things.
I've taken some of the values of my own employer, so I try now once a quarter to just have half an hour. The person say, this is like a one-to-one, put our phones away. How's the job going? What's working for you? What's not working for you? This is how it's going for me, and really try and do that. And the carers that are, that are good, it tends to be a very friendly 20-minute chat with maybe the odd little bit of, if we could just do that a bit better, it would be great. When it's difficult carers, it becomes quite challenging.
My employer was really interested in what I wanted to do next and in helping me do that. And I suppose we had a relationship where I was invested in making sure that part of my job was making sure that they could pursue the career that they wanted, and they, as an employer, they helped me get to the next stage in my career, and had a lot of interest in that, and thinking about how they might be able to tailor the experience that they gave me and the different opportunities in work that would help me achieve that.
While some performance concerns can be handled slowly and gently, There are times when you'll be justified in taking things very seriously straight away.
You have to think to yourself, are they a danger to your health? Are they a risk to your safety? Are they, what's the scenario without them? Obviously things like, theft, violence, poor attendance, not doing the job. At the end of the day, you've got to let them go. But you need to probably speak to your other team about that in a confidential manner.
Most employers in most workplaces outside the PA scenario don't have to worry about their employees risking the employer's life and safety. So you as an employer have an unusual position here. Your rights to life, safety, liberty, and enjoyment of your life are engaged by your employees because of where they work and some of their tasks. So if an employee has gone off the rails in some way and is, even if it's for understandable reasons, they're grieving, they've had a big shock in their lives, or they're recovering from an addiction or something like that, you still have the right to set the clear boundaries and to ensure that you are safe as their employer, but as also the person whose life they contribute to, whose quality of life and practicalities they support day by day. Check the terms and conditions of your insurance. There's almost certainly a helpline which will help you with onboarding employees, dealing with disputes, and the unfortunate situation if you need to terminate an employment relationship. It will also almost certainly include funding for keeping things out of courts and tribunals. So it'll almost certainly include funding for mediation and informal methods of resolving disputes.
Abuse can be two ways though, because if we're not giving somebody their best back as an employer and we're making the environment not fab because of the impact of them not doing something right, we can also be guilty of, that could be seen as like unfair treatment, especially if things are rosy with another team member that comes in. So I think though, long-term, regular, not doing things how you want, that is, I guess, a lack of negligence, and that has to be addressed. And I think the key to it is, and I'm not brilliant at this, but I'm trying to get better, and you get better with age, is just pausing and going, right, why? What is the why? And actually say to somebody,
I think you can think about a positive workplace in terms of making you feel comfortable and supported and I guess happy at work. And I think that's, like clear communication. I think the expectations of me were always very clear and very, I guess, realistic as well. And I knew from the get-go what they were. I think one of the most stressful things when you're working or in any scenario is when you're not really sure what's expected of you.
The formalities you'll need for safe conflict and difficult conversations are a training schedule, a disciplinary procedure, a grievance procedure, and an appraisal and review process. You need to think about how you'll run hands-on training, how to present information about your PA's tasks, what support your existing team can give to your new PAs, how you'll give praise and encouragement, how you'll open conversations about poor performance or disagreements, adapting to different learning styles, and what you would do if you were in immediate danger.